Okay, this is coming from example 1. Right, so now, if we get the square root of a negative number, we can actually address that. We don't have to say we can't do it because it's negative. We could say we can do this. We can break it up into a square root of negative 1 times the square root of 12, and the square root of negative 1 will be I. Okay. Now, the square root of 12, you need to be able to simplify that without turning it into a decimal. Hannah, do you have a question? Okay. Right? Something like the square root of 12, you need to be able to simplify without turning it into a decimal. In this class, in an Algebra 2 trig class, we expect that we can do that kind of thing. If you're not good at it, you're going to get a lot of practice in the next few chapters. 12, this is where you need to know your perfect squares. 12 is not a perfect square, but can you think any factors of 12 that are perfect squares? 4 times 3, right? The 4 is a perfect square. So if you break it up like this, make it the square root of 4 times the square root of 3, and then the square root of 4 is 2, right? So that's 2 times the square root of 3, and then you've got the I. So we would write that like 2I times the square root of 3. So you need to, if you don't know your squares, that's why I put them on that page of multiplication tables and perfect squares. Because maybe when you did this, whenever you did this, you did a factor tree. You kept dividing out 2 until you couldn't anymore. I'm not going to do a factor tree. You could do that if it works for you. I'm going to do it like this. What about this one here? The square root of 36. We can split off the negative 1 from the 36. And then the square root of negative 1 is I. And the square root of 36 is 6, which is 6I. Now, one thing to keep in mind here, okay, when you get a square root, when you're asked to evaluate a square root like that, it's assumed to be positive, right? I don't say plus or minus 6I at this point, because we were presented with the square root, we can assume it's the positive. When you solve an equation and you take the square root of both sides, that's when you have to put in the plus or minus. So you assume when it's just presented on the screen here that it's the positive, what they call the principal square root.